Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 174th Right and Left discussion forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel is going to discuss wild canines. No, we're going to discuss the question, should social media be regulated in order to prevent censorship? Social media has become dominated by a handful of platforms that reach hundreds of millions of subscribers worldwide and have made easy entry into the market by competitors very difficult. As such, they've been able to control the content of much political speech, blocking out the content they find objectionable. Today's panel begins with Joe Gaines, former faculty member at the University of Akron, and Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council, Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services, and Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. Joe, ever since our country's founding, we have held sacred a citizen's right to have their voice heard. With the onset of privately owned and controlled social media platforms, we have relinquished control of much of that right to a handful of high-tech entrepreneurs. Do you think it's time for government regulation of social media companies to assure that citizens have free speech, not abridged? Joe, you're on mute, Joe.
How's that?
Yeah, fine. You want me to read that question again?
No, I got you.
Okay, very good.
I know it's hard to believe, but Joe Gaines is ready. I find the question a little confusing in some ways, but interesting. I don't know how you want to define social media. I mean, there's extremes to it. I mean, social media like Facebook and so on, it's pretty minor when you get to it. But then you get to social media where you've got organizations that are doing things like racist, not just racism, but things like, I can't think of it right now.
Well, I think that what you're talking about appears on social media like Twitter and Facebook. So
right. Well, yeah, but I worry more about like organizations that are out there and trying to get people to join them by going to the extremes
on social media.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what concerns me. But I don't know. I don't like the idea of censorship at all. Never have. And I think we need to control, but we've got to be careful about it. And when control becomes when control becomes too much, it takes place and takes over as a censorship, then I think we've got problems.
Okay, now we're talking about censorship in the way that the owners of the social media platforms will decide what content appears and what doesn't. Are you talking, when you talk censorship, are you talking about the government?
No, I'm talking about like what you are too, what appears and what doesn't. I think anything you want, I think people are allowed to have their opinion. And that's one of the problems we have in this country right now, is that every time somebody gives their opinion, it gets downgraded or knocked. It's just an opinion. It's not necessarily fact. And what is fact? We need to get out the facts. We need to get out the truth. And we don't always do that. And social media certainly doesn't seem to help it.
Patty, where do you come down on this topic?
Does that make sense?
Well, when we look at social media and possibly controlling or the data that's going to be on there, we have to look at how they make their money and what advantage it is for them to have some type of control over what is being put across their particular services. You know, in public media, whether it be a cable station or a regular news station, are regulated, are actually self-regulated, because if they publish information that is too far out there, if it is dangerous, if it is threatening, they will feel the wrath of their sponsors, who will no longer advertise on their show. And for monetary purposes, they have to control what is being put out there. They have certain standards that they are expected to live up to. When it comes to social media, first of all, we have to understand that these are private companies. And for that reason, free speech technically doesn't apply. You know, the free speech statutes, and I'm a big believer in free speech, I've mentioned this before, but it prevents the government from oppressing what or suppressing what is going to be stated. With the social media companies, they actually, the only thing that can control them is the way they make their money is they leverage the individual user data and put that out there, and that's sold. And they have to be, you know, transparent with it. And they really, frankly, aren't going to be hurt no matter what they put on there. The problem, though, is that what we are seeing is that there are those groups that are using social media to purport various facts that are not facts, to put out information that is dangerous, to put out information that enable to plan organizations. Much of the January 6th storming of the Capitol was planned on social media. And so it would behoove social media to start to self-regulate what is going to be placed on there. And that's what we saw when Facebook, Twitter, and various streaming devices decided to prevent certain people, certain organizations from advertising because they knew that this was dangerous. They are also facing the wrath of both Democrats and Republicans for allowing certain information to be placed out there. The one control the government has is that in Section 230 of the Liability out of the Communication and Decency Act of 1996, these streaming areas have liability protection carve-outs so that they can't be sued if someone comes on to their platform and says, let's go out and rob this bank, and everybody gets together and robs the bank. They can't be sued for that. There has been the threat that they will take out those possibilities or take out those protections from that liability. Well, you know, the problem with that, if they take the liability away, the streaming devices will just simply shut everybody down. I think, and I'm glad to see that these organizations, and I don't think it's a matter, John, you mentioned about their blocking groups they object to. I don't know that it's just object to or disagree with. They are objecting or stopping content that is dangerous, content that is overtly false. For example, they've blocked QAnon on some of the platforms. I think that that's a good move. And I think that this is something that these streaming sources and these social media outlets have to do to take some responsibility for material that's being placed out there.
How do we know what all they're blocking?
How do we know individually? Yeah. They can, a lot of times it's published. You know, usually the group that's being blocked will come out and say, hey, I've been blocked. You also, I think if you try to go to that particular site, you know, if someone has been blocked on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, when you go to that site, it will say that you can no longer reach that individual.
Bryan, what are your thoughts?
Well, we've reached an Orwellian stage in our social media development where Big Brother can shut you down because of their subjective rules and they don't like what you're saying. They shut down Parler, which was a sort of a startup, been around, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years. Amazon went in, and Amazon will probably get sued because there were contractual agreements to provide web hosting services for Parler. Parler is similar to Twitter. In one day, Amazon shut down Parler because of their terms of service agreement with Parler. They didn't like the speech that was coming out of Parler. It wasn't radical. It wasn't QAnon.
What kind of speech does Parler put out?
Parler is very similar to Twitter, but it has a little more of a right-leaning bent to it. Okay? A little more of a right-leaning bent to it. And if you look at the accounts that have been suspended from Facebook and Twitter and these other sites, there are far more conservative and right-leaning spokespeople and groups that have been shut down by those organizations. I really think that I understand the whole private business excuse. So that should hold true for every private business. If someone comes in to my bakery and I've done a search on their social media and I don't like what they're saying about an election or a person, I can refuse service to that person. For that, it's my terms of service. And when you come into my store and you check that box that say you agree, nobody reads the terms of service. I'd be hard pressed to say that when I got on Facebook or Twitter or anything, or you go to a website and it says, hey, we use cookies, and you check the box that they use cookies, you don't know what that cookie is collecting off of your interaction with their website. So we're on a very slippery slope, and the social media companies have shown their hand that when they don't like the speech that you're saying, and it might be your political affiliation, it might be your feelings about a particular issue, they will arbitrarily shut you down. They will
Bryan,
suspend your account.
How do you suggest they deal with organizations like QAnon, organizations that are organizing rights? How do they deal with that?
Yeah, I think they could do the same thing because they've yet to shut down the group that's out there radicalizing ISIS people in different countries. Facebook is worldwide. Facebook has yet to shut down any Antifa website out there.
Okay, but
they've not shut down any BLM website.
How do you deal with this? I mean, should they be shutting down some of these organizations or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, I don't know of, and everybody points to January 6th. We can put that aside. Antifa has done more damage to the country in burning down buildings and rioting and looting. All that was planned on social media, all of it. Okay, you cannot get a crowd of 5,000 people to show up at a particular time. They're not sending letters to people. They're not dropping email to people. They're using social media. So it has to be a level playing field. They have to if they're going to shut down Steven Crowder, who's a conservative voice, and if they're going to shut down and threaten PragerU on Facebook for their videos about socialism and about some hot topics that they don't like, they got to do the same thing for BLM. They got to do the same thing for the Maxine Waters out there. They got to do the same thing for anybody that gets on there and in their terms incites hate speech. That is this notion that that's why it's Orwellian. What is hate speech then? What's hate speech to Patty is totally different than what hate speech is to Ron or to Joe or to John. I just think it's, they've gone really too far with this notion that they can actually shut down the president of the United States. I mean, Twitter suspended the official president of the United States account forever.
And I agreed with that. So yeah, you're right. We have differences of opinions.
But see, the thing is, it's great now, but trust me, they're going to gore your ox and you're not going to like it.
Ron, what do you think?
It's not a new issue. I side pretty much with Joe. You know, I don't like seeing censorship, as Bryan is saying here too. It's a little odd sometimes to my mind that conservatives who are all for no government regulation are calling for some, but that's beside the point. I happened to hit an article in Scientific American not too long ago about Facebook has suspended a lot of stuff in Australia because they didn't like what the government was doing there. So the government doesn't have an official voice. Australian government doesn't have an official voice on Facebook at this point. But looking back in history, this started with newspapers and eventually grew to, particularly with the advent of wire services. And by the 1970s, with the Associated Press coming pretty much to core, countries, particularly in what they call the global south, which is the Southern Hemisphere, Latin America, Africa, are getting news about their local situations from outlets from North America and from the Northern Hemisphere. So if you're a Brazilian, your news about your country is coming to you through the United States. This started to change with people like Castro started their own news systems and for propaganda purposes. But so it's not a new thing that that corporate entities control what information we get. I happen to agree with Patty that Trump was shut down only when he started promulgating these sort of conspiracy theories about the election. They decided this was a little too much. But on the other hand, I don't really agree that they should have shut him down. We all have the responsibility to do our own thinking and to try to find out from as many sources as we can what's the truth of the matter, whatever truth is. I think Pontius Pilate raised that question some time ago. What is truth? So I think censorship is not necessarily a universal bad thing, but I think it's we have to be very, very cautious about it. Bryan mentioned a slippery slope, and that goes with both sides of this, censorship and complete freedom. So you have to look at it. It's a very powerful thing. The Arab Spring in Egypt was organized by means of Facebook, for example, or similar similar things. And whether it's BLM or whether it's Antifa or whether it's the insurrection of January 6th, it's a powerful means of getting people together more than, and it's immediate means rather than newspapers where you wait till it gets published and think about it and write your letter to the editor. So I think it's a complex situation, but I'm with Joe on this. We got to be very careful about censorship. We have to use it as little as possible. I've always felt that way. So
how do you feel about Facebook putting, and not saying that you can't be on there, but adding attachments saying, you know, read more about this? I
like that. I have used that regularly. You see a little eye in a circle down at the corner, and that it gives you the sources for this, and you can start reading about that. So
the reason I like that is because unfortunately there's no way of telling what's factual and what's not. And we've gotten to the point, I mean, look at some of the conspiracy theories that people are believing, and they think it's gospel because it's on the internet. You know, I am very concerned about that.
I'm concerned about the Russian collusion thing that keeps floating around that comes out of our favorite person that never got elected. You know, I mean, that just seems to make the rounds. And we know that was a conspiracy. We know that there wasn't anything there. We spent $30 million to find out, but it still surfaces. I mean, everybody has their own little secret conspiracy theory. I don't believe any of them. I mean, I get very little of my news from Twitter or Facebook. I try to be sort of discriminating. You know, I'll watch as much of CNN that I can and MSNBC that I can without throwing a brick at the TV. But I just want to see what people are hearing. And, you know,
agreed.
I be honest with you, I have not watched, I cut the cord at home. I don't get many channels. So we're pretty much like Netflix and stuff. And I'll read some stuff online, but I really think it's dangerous when you can have a private company under that guise of, well, we're a private company and we can decide how, where, what, and who we want. That would be the same as the telephone company initially. They were a private company. Did they eavesdrop on your conversation, say, we don't like what you're talking about, so we're going to shut your service down?
Actually, they do.
Yeah. After about 6 years,
the government is collecting all of this, so we're all going to end up in Gitmo someday.
That's true.
After about 6 years of doing this program, I didn't think I would be surprised.
Oh, they're coming for you,
I am surprised to hear Pontius Pilate being quoted. That's kind of new to me. Let me throw something at you. Looking at the First Amendment and the freedom of speech clause, we have to remember at the time the public forum was some local newspapers and pamphlets and personal speeches. But looking at the entire clause, it mentions the right of the people to peaceably assemble may not be abridged. Abridged meaning cut short or curtailed. Isn't modern social media an equivalent to a public forum?
I agree with that. Yeah.
And that the First Amendment would forbid curtailing or cutting short that forum.
But you use the word peacefully, and that's where the difference comes in. If you are, by the nature of your speech, promoting violence towards any other group in any way, shape, or form, I wouldn't consider that a peaceful assembly. That would be my only distinction there.
Also, as Bryan alluded to, the private company thing, that's true. That's true. This quote, this First Amendment responds to the government not being able to shut it down. So there's the censorship. But you're right, it is a private company. They need to regulate themselves, and they regulate themselves, as Patty, I think, mentioned, by how much money they're bringing in from the sponsors. And, I tried to get on Parler, but they shut it down just about that. And the reason I wanted to do that is that I have a person I know who dropped Facebook to get on Parler, and this person has been pretty much a right winger ever since I've known the individual, and I wanted to see why. So, but however, I lost the opportunity since they shut it down. So
wasn't the deal with Parler? The server that they were using was blocked for their usage, so they had to find another organization to provide a server for them. And I thought they had, and that they were starting back up, but it's going slow.
They're back up. They're probably at 90% right now.
Okay.
But see, that goes to the point. They were buying web hosting services from Amazon. Amazon has a very large cloud-based service that they sell to people.
Okay.
And they bought it. Amazon sold it to them. They had a contractual agreement. Amazon did not like what was happening over at Parler and dug down into their little terms of service contract and found some little sentence that said, hey, guess what? We're shutting you down. And they pulled the plug on Parler. And that was the end of Parler. So that could happen to anybody. And that's what's dangerous about. They have the right to do that.
The terms of service, they have the right to do that.
Yeah, they have a right to do that. So I could have a private business and I could have a little terms of service and it says, nobody reads it. And you walk into my bakery and I've already, what's your name? Oh, I've already done a little social media search on you. I don't like who you are and your social media score and your political score. I'm not serving you. So there's the door. That's what they did to Parler. And that's what Facebook does to people. That's why I think it's dangerous. If it's good for them, why isn't it good for the private business that's running a plumbing outfit?
But I'm still concerned about the dangerous speech, lies, unchecked lies that are placed out on social media, which can lead and do lead to violence.
And I'm right there with you.
We need, and I agree that you probably, I'm sure you are. And there has to be some way to deal with that without infringing upon speech. I just don't know what it is. I've read reports that the best thing is for social media to self-regulate, not get the government involved in this.
You would hope.
The big thing they've been pushing is repealing Section 230. Well, they repeal Section 230, take away the liability protections. They won't publish anybody because they can't take the chance they're going to be sued. That'll effectively shut them down completely.
Well, they're going to have to do the math on that. Then they're going to have to say, you know what, we're going to have to apply this standard evenly across the board for years.
The other possibility is that one particular side is producing more of that than another. That's always
and both sides agree with that.
In total, if you looked at for years, BLM and Antifa and ISIS and all these groups have been using social media. Nary a peep. Nobody wanted to shut down the Muslim Brotherhood. Nobody wanted to shut down ISIS. They went on for years. All of a sudden now, someone's inciting a riot. We're going to shut him down right now. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if they were doing this in years past and they did it today, I'd have no problem with it. But they just started applying their little paragraph in their terms of service that says, we don't like what you're talking about.
Because of one riot on January the 6th, where we had riots and mayhem all summer long.
Yeah.
And nobody spoke about shutting them down.
No. And when they had their own little city there in Portland or wherever they had it, they were using social media a lot to determine where the police were, where they were coming, all that kind of stuff. So, it's well,
I think the sad thing about public information today is, honestly, I don't believe any of it. I think that every piece of information we get, whether it's on social media, the newsprint, or the national television media, it's all biased. The closest thing I've seen to unbiased media is NPR, and it's terrible. For the last 4 years, the only time I listen to the radio is when I'm in the car. And the only station I listen to is NPR because everything else is worse. But the fact is that I would turn on the radio and wonder, how long will it be before I hear them rapping Donald Trump? I don't think I ever got to a full 2 minutes without hearing a negative comment about Donald Trump. Trump, all the time.
There's more about Trump than it does about the media.
Oh, you think so, huh?
I think so.
I think that Trump was a child of the media. Don't you remember the campaign in 2000? Was it 15 or 16 that the campaign?
They hatched that dragon's egg, didn't they?
Pardon me?
They hatched that dragon's egg.
Oh.
Well, I think it's like you were mentioning earlier. I just finished a book on Harry Truman. He hated William Randolph Hearst with a passion.
Yeah.
There were certain newspapers, if he could have, he would have shut them down because of what he considered the seditious nature of their columns and everything. He was in the midst of the Korean conflict, the Korean War, and he was no friend to any of the papers. And I mean, he had a little list, and if he could have, he would have shut down some newspapers for what he considered treasonous articles about, what they were doing and how they were doing it. So, I mean, it's been around for a while. It's just in a different format.
Yeah. Well, folks, I believe we're about ready to wrap it up. Thank you very much for a spirited discussion. And we'll see you in about 2 weeks.